Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Did Shakespeare. I'm Cassidy Cash, and this is the channel where we go behind the curtain and into the real life and history of William Shakespeare by asking questions we always wondered about what it was like to live in 16th century England, and we explore the answers that introduce us to what it was like to live during the life of William Shakespeare. This week, we're asking a listener-submitted question about Shakespeare's professional life. The question we're looking at today is, did Shakespeare act in his own plays? Rampant on the internet, if you go looking into this question, are anecdotes about Shakespeare performing in his own plays as an actor. One of my favorite stories about William Shakespeare is the idea that Shakespeare may have stood in for a sick actor, stepping in at the last minute to perform the role of Lady Macbeth at one of the court performances of Macbeth, specifically in front of James I, for whom that play was designed. I really like the idea of that story, but I didn't really know about the history or accuracy of that tale. Is there any veracity to this idea, or is it just a story? One of the best places I know of to begin when I'm asking a question about Shakespeare's life is a website called Shakespeare Online. It's run by Amanda Mabillard, and she covers a whole host of things about William Shakespeare over there on her website. There aren't many things you can't find an answer to there. So I'll link to her website below this episode. She didn't sponsor this episode. I just really like that website and use it a lot, so I thought you might like it too. In her article titled Shakespeare the Actor and Playwright, Amanda contends that Shakespeare is the only known person who not only wrote plays for his company, acted in the plays, and shared the profits, but who was also one of the housekeepers who owned the building. For 17 years, he was one of the owners of the Globe Theatre, and for 8 years, he was one of the housekeepers of the company's second theater, the Blackfriars, as well. She is quoting a researcher there who she cites in her article, and again, all the links to these details will be down below this video. But many Shakespeare scholars believe it is Shakespeare's role as an actor that may have led to his start in theater in the very first place. Now, we don't know for certain, but there are some evidential things going on from the life of William Shakespeare to make this suggestion. For example, Leicester's Men, a playing company that was traveling around England doing shows at different country stopped in Stratford-upon-Avon when William Shakespeare was a young boy. We talk with Laurie Johnson, Shakespeare historian, about Leicester's Men and Shakespeare's potential involvement with that company as a result of their stop in Stratford-upon-Avon in episode 176 of That Shakespeare Life. So if you want to know about Leicester's Men and when they stopped in Shakespeare's hometown when he was a kid, check the links down below to hear that entire interview. But the contention is that they were so flamboyant and attractive when they came through town that a young William Shakespeare, who was already thinking about what am I going to do for a career? What am I going to step into? He would have wanted to go along with them and step into that profession because of how cool it was. That's the idea anyway. However, Shakespeare ended up coming to London. We do know that he made it there and was established as an actor by 1592. We have concrete evidence of this fact from Robert Greene, who wrote his directly insulting slander of Shakespeare on his deathbed, saying, quote, "There is an upstart crow beautified with our feathers," end quote. Now, it's a huge, long diatribe against a whole lot of things. Poor Robert Greene had a lot of anger, but he specifically attacks Shakespeare as an actor. So we know Shakespeare was at least making a big enough splash in London by 1592 that people like Robert Greene, who was essentially a pillar of the established acting community there in London, to take the time to insult him. Shakespeare must have been doing big things in the industry. But being established as an actor didn't quite answer our question of whether Shakespeare acted in his own plays. So I kept looking a little further, and here's what I found out. By the 1590s, Shakespeare's plays Henry VI, Comedy of Errors, and Titus Andronicus were popular in London. Most likely, they were being performed by a playing company called Pembroke's Men, frequently before Elizabeth I. And many critics conclude that Shakespeare was a writer and actor for Pembroke's Men prior to 1592. So practically, it makes sense that Shakespeare would be stepping in to fill some of these roles. If he's both writing the stories and he's right there to perform them, that would make sense. However, that's just conjecture, as we don't really know what Shakespeare was doing prior to 1592, not definitely anyway. So what else is there to find out? After an outbreak of plague closed down the physical playing spaces in London for the year of 1593, Shakespeare returned in 1594 under the official patronage of the Earl of Southampton. He had achieved this level of status writing poetry like Venus and Adonis for the Earl of Southampton. And there's a whole beautiful story to explore there about the Earl of Southampton's relationship to Shakespeare, as well as the play Venus and Adonis. But the point is, he filled his time while plague was shutting down the theater writing poems. And then he came back in a big way, started acting and writing for the Lord Strange's Men. Now, Lord Strange's Men and Lord Chamberlain's Men, those titles are interchangeable. While the evidence is scarce, one historian named Shakespeare's first biographer, Nicholas Rowe, credits Shakespeare as having played these roles: Edward I in the play Edward I, Adam in As You Like It, King Duncan in Macbeth, King Henry in Henry IV, and Hamlet's ghost father in Hamlet. Some other scholars suggest Shakespeare may have also played the apothecary in Romeo and Juliet, taking some textual details there to put that together and make that claim. It seems from what evidence that I am able to uncover that, yes, Shakespeare did act in several plays, and just the proximity of him to the plays that he was writing, it makes sense to think that he's the owner of the theater company. He's running the Globe and the Blackfriars. If needed, he could step in and act in his own productions. But knowing for certain which roles he played is much harder to track down. If you have notes or source material on how we know what we think we know about Shakespeare's acting career, please share it with me in the show notes, or come chat with me directly over on our Patreon page. I'd love to hear about what you found or research you're doing into Shakespeare's acting career, and who knows, it may end up on an episode of That Shakespeare Life. That's it for this week. Thank you for watching. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.